Before we begin today's episode, we want to share a brief content note. This conversation includes discussion of sexual assault and sexual violence, which may be difficult or triggering for some listeners. Please take care of yourself as you listen and feel free to pause or step away if needed. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence, resources and support all are available, and we'll include those in the show notes down below. Welcome to Her Layered Life, where we talk with women business owners about faith, family, business, and every relationship in between. Here's the truth. Women drive over 80 trillion in global spending every year, yet only 2% of those dollars go into women-owned businesses. What if we took that to 5%? We could change the dynamics of our economy and millions of women's lives. One story, one layer, one woman at a time. Because her life is layered and her influence can change the world. Today's episode is a little bit different because sometimes the most important conversations we can have as women are not just about business. They're about safety, dignity, and protecting the people we love. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, for those of you who didn't know. And today we're talking about how to educate in our communities and have the courage that can change lives. Today I'm joined by Liliana Arbon, Arbon,
Arbon.
Arbon,
Yeah.
Arbon, the director of Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, which is also known as UCASA. UCASA is a statewide organization working to prevent sexual violence, support survivors, and strengthen communities through education, advocacy, and resources. And Lily and I actually met in a way that actually feels like so good, part of our layers, right?
Totally.
Totally part of our layered life. She first came into my world as a half-T model and influencer. And during one of our conversations, I asked the questions we all ask when meeting someone new. So what do you do? When she told me she was the director of UCASA, I immediately wanted to learn more because sexual assault is something that impacts far more lives than people realize. Yet it's something we often don't talk about openly enough. Since then, Half-T has had the opportunity to partner with UCASA in community education and awareness. And I've gained so much respect for the work Lily and her team are doing. So Lily, welcome to Her Layered Life.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Before we start to talk about UCASA, I want you to describe yourself outside of the title of director of UCASA. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh my gosh, that's that's hard because I feel UCASA is such a big part of who I am. But outside of UCASA, I'm first a mother to my son Mateo, who's 4 and keeps me really
I
busy
can't believe he's
every
4.
day. I
I
know,
literally can't believe
I
he's
know.
4.
He keeps me busy every day. And I was a pet mom too for 15 years and recently lost her. And think of her always. And a wife to Brock. We enjoy going on family trips. We actually just planned our trip to Maui this next month, so we're
Oh,
really excited.
that's so fun.
Yes, we love going to the beach. And the past couple of years, I think one of the biggest things that I've been intentional about myself is taking care of me. So on a health journey, so I love going to the gym, making sure I get that time to myself to reconnect, re-energize, and get through the day.
I love it. I love it. What first drew you to the work in advocacy and prevention?
So I have often get this question asked, and I have to really think about every kind of moment that led me to this work. Prior to serving an LDS mission, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. I knew that that's what I was going to be, and so I had that plan. But I went on on a mission and served in the inner cities of Philadelphia, and saw families, and some families were broken, some families needed that extra help, and obviously Christ really brought that to their lives. And then when I got home, something shifted. I thought, maybe that's not what I needed to do. And while Brock was serving in the military, I and getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan, I decided that I was going to volunteer somewhere because I didn't want to, work full time and miss out on opportunities to, to be with him as he got ready to leave to Afghanistan. And so I started volunteering. And one of those volunteer opportunities was at Project Sister, which was a local rape crisis center in LA County.
In LA,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Yeah, in LA. And so I started volunteering there as a victim advocate, responding. And my very first hospital accompaniment, which are advocates, what they do is respond to hospitals and meet survivors, victims there while they get a forensic exam. And my very first hospital accompaniment was for a 4-year-old. And she, um, and I never have forgotten that first visit because it was about a 40-minute drive for me. It was in the middle of the night. And I kept thinking, what am I going to say to this little 4-year-old?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have very little information, but I knew it was a 4-year-old little girl. And I kept thinking, like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? How am I gonna get through this? And I got there, and she had the absolute best nurse there with her, and mom. And I remember that she was so resilient, and she had no idea really the level of impact and what she had experienced, right? But she knew something happened, and I turned around and I saw mom, and mom was obviously broken, devastated. And I realized that my work was there to help mom kind of navigate this process. And as I think about that visit, I just remember telling mom, I know she was blaming herself. She kept blaming herself for what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I recall telling her, you did such a good job because at the moment something happened, she told you what happened.
Oh,
And
right.
it was instant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I do remember her kind of thinking obviously different for a moment, obviously still blamed herself, but she did, recognize that instant something happened, she was able to communicate with her mom that this, something did not feel good from what happened to her.
Right. Right.
And she was able to help her and address it. And she kept going to seek services at the center where I was working at and got some therapy and just really, you know, healed
Mm-hmm.
as a mom and as her little girl too,
Yeah.
right? Of that relationship. So that kind of, always centers me, and why I continue to do the work that I do is I think of that little girl and I think about that mom. And now as a mom, I think about the influence I have in raising, a little boy in
Mm-hmm.
this world, and the importance of teaching him how to be a good person and how to respect people.
I love that. All right. So this work, we've talked about this a lot.
Yes.
In fact, something that's kind of cool is when Charlie, my oldest, came home, she actually went to work with Liliana and with UCASA. And that was something we talked about often. And we've talked about this work is heavy. It's
It
a
is.
very, very heavy work. So what keeps you motivated? And we'd even had a text conversation when I asked you to come be on the podcast about how funding has been cut again by legislation, and how hard that is. And so even in moments where you think everything's working out, taking that hit, what keeps you motivated?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to recognize that sometimes I don't feel motivated to keep fighting,
Mm,
right? And I think that that's one of the pieces that we don't often talk enough about, is that there's moments in this work where it feels like I want to give up. Like there's no more of me that can keep fighting for
mhm,
something that other people sometimes don't recognize, how important it is to invest, whether it's in prevention, education, or in just responding to
mhm,
these cases. But I think that what I feel has helped me is making sure that I center that I'm not doing it for anyone else but for the survivor, and also for the community, right? Because we're not just thinking about how to respond, we're also thinking about how to prevent this. And so I truly think that our mission is that we do really have to center ourselves in this idea that we can end violence, that it does um, feel attainable, but it will require all of us to be
mhm,
involved in it, not just UCASA, not just the rape crisis centers, but all of us. Like Hafti has been that incredible voice of leadership around how businesses can also engage in prevention education, whether you're a business, whether you're a school, whether you're a mom or a father, right? That we all play an important part of ending it.
I love that. I love that. Tell me, let's backtrack just a smidge, not really backtracking, but now we're gonna get a little bit more into the details. But for those listeners that aren't familiar, explain what is UCASA and what does the organization do?
Yeah. So the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault really focuses around training and education. And training and education really looks at um, not only individuals, but also organizations, whether you're a rape crisis center, whether you're a DV shelter, whether you're a community organizer. We recognize that all of those people may be interacting with potential victims and or looking at prevention education. And so we do a lot of training for those organizations, those companies, and those individuals so that they know how to respond to sexual violence and how to prevent violence from happening in their own organizations or companies. So when we think about some of the trainings we've done, we look we look around policies. What are your internal policies that prevent violence from happening, and or policies that respond in a trauma informed way
Mhm.
when those unfortunate events of sexual violence happen within your companies or organizations? So we do that, and then we do a lot of policy work, right, as well. We just finished the 45 days of the legislative session, and we are always looking at policies, laws that legislators are presenting that impact victims of sexual assault, and we give information and education on what would that look like in practice,
Mhm.
right? We had some wins, and then we have some, unfortunate losses during the session. But that was actually one of the things I was so excited to connect with Charlie about, because all of the people who have been engaged in the past couple of years have influenced this decision. So, an example of the work that we do is, we have a statewide sexual assault helpline, and that helpline is available to victims, parents, professionals, everyone, right, calls that helpline. Whether they're calling because they need a resource, whether they're calling because they just want to talk to somebody
Mhm.
about what my daughter or son just disclosed to me,
Mhm.
or medical professionals that are meeting with a patient and they just don't know where to send them because they just disclosed this happened to them. So they can call the helpline, get that help. We have had that helpline almost 5 years, and each year we've kind of gone up to the legislature and said, "Please invest in this helpline. It's helping thousands of people every year,
Mhm.
and we need you to help us sustain it." Each year we've gone for funding, and each year sometimes they say, "No, we don't have funding," and sometimes they say, "We'll give you one-time funding." So each year it's a battle up
Right.
there. But this year we finally were able to get ongoing funding for the helpline. So we know that for the foreseeable future, we will have access to funding, so that victims, survivors, family members, community members can reach out for help and guidance and resources. So it's a big win
Incredible.
for us.
That's a humongous win.
Yes,
I think I've been on this road for this helpline from the very beginning because I feel like it's been about 5 years since we started working
absolutely.
together, right? Maybe a little bit longer than that, but the helpline has been something that's been on your mind and something on
Yeah.
UCASA's um, big board, right? Like their big hag board. This is what
Hmm.
we really want to be able to achieve. In fact, I've been in the car, I've been out to lunch. Charlie's still one of your,
Yes.
right? She still volunteers.
She's volunteering and she's also helps us with some of the training still.
Yeah, which is incredible, but I've been with her when she's taken a call,
Hmm.
from the helpline, and it's been very it's because we talk about helplines, okay, that's great, but when you can actually see it in action and see the other person that's on the phone, so the people that are out that they are calling are actually volunteers that have gone through training. It's
Training.
the
Hmm.
40-hour
It's
training,
the 40-hour
right?
sexual assault counselor
Yeah, so
training.
they've been through the training and they're able to be able to just be that first, well, not always the first, but be somebody that will be on the other line. That's a
Right.
person.
Hmm.
That's a person that has the education and the training to be able to know. Now they're not going to solve all the problems.
Right.
In fact, I think Charlie actually ended up giving her three different rape crisis centers to be able to go and contact if she needed these,
Hmm.
these things. But um, and there's a lot of um, sensitivity to the
Mhm.
timing of it all, right? As
Yeah,
well, because lots of times victims call or they need help, but because they don't know how to find it, it just gets buried and the help never actually
exactly.
happens.
Exactly. Yeah, and so
That's
our
cool.
helpline is huge.
That's cool.
It's a big win.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That makes me
Yeah.
so happy. She's gonna be stoked when she hears that.
I know, I know.
So, Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault provide what do you provide for the communities? I kind of want to talk about a little bit because I think that this is a very important part, and this is something that I super value is the aspect of educating in
Mhm.
communities, right? And when we first started working together, we were really talking a lot about consent, and that was something that
Absolutely.
resonated with me as a mother because we don't talk about consent, and especially in Utah, we've had this conversation a million gazillion times about how, as culturally within Utah, we think if we talk about consent, we are then basically telling our kids to go out and have sexual relationships. And culturally, that is something that, as a religion that is very heavily within our state, we don't believe in premarital sex. So we have a hard time getting parents to get on board to have these conversations about positive, healthy relationships,
Correct.
consent, getting consent to be taught in the schools. I know that there's a big thing there, but also getting parents to sit down and have conversations with their kids.
Yes.
Because really, essentially, that's where it should start, right?
Absolutely.
That's where it should start. So talk to me a little bit about what you've seen out in the communities and what UCASA has been able to do.
Sure. You're absolutely right. Like I think that that is something that unfortunately we don't have the skills sometimes to talk about how to have healthy relationships, how to talk about consent within our homes. And so we just kind of shy away from it because we're afraid. And then we think, oh, like you just said, right, that we are encouraging sexual behavior. But one of the things that UCASA really does believe in is that consent has to be taught appropriately based on age, right? And there's a lot of organizations that do a lot of training on this. But one of the things that we often talk about when we're talking about is consent is in everything. It's not just within sexual
Mhm.
relationships, right?
Mhm.
Consent means saying, "Hey, you know what? I took a picture. Are you okay with me posting it on social media?"
Mhm.
Consent means saying, "Hey, are you okay if I give you a hug?" Right?
Right.
All of that consent is in everything. And so you can teach it from a very young age, right? To again, a teenager who's navigating relationships,
Mhm.
and it is not easy. And I do believe that it is important for us as parents to know how to have these conversations. I cannot expect my school or a stranger or a friend to teach my son about consent, right? And so, one of the things that I have recognized and I'm learning as I've been in this work for so long now, is how to have those conversations with my 4-year old. And and it's so interesting because it is scary. And even though I feel like I have the knowledge and the skills, I'm like, "Okay, how am I gonna do this, with him?" Right?
Mhm.
And it is as simple as honestly teaching boundaries and limits, right?
Mhm.
Um, I look at him engage with other kids, and sometimes other kids I've seen it play out in front of me of other kids saying, "Hey, will you come with me to go do this?" Because they don't feel comfortable doing it, so they
Mhm.
kind of pull him to do it. And so it's having those conversations around, you know what? If you feel uncomfortable that someone's asking you to do something that you don't feel good about, you should say, "It's okay. I'm gonna talk to my mom first about
Mm.
that," or to the adult in the room,
Mhm.
right? And so he's now learning to know how to have what sometimes feels scary to say, "Hey, I don't feel comfortable doing this," right? And it may be something small. It's not anything big, right?
No,
Because
that's
I'm there.
important.
But it's important to help them recognize the importance of setting those boundaries. So we do that. One of the cool projects that I think has been really awesome too is around consent education and prevention education. Was actually Charlie was a part of this, was creating what we call the promoter model, or in Spanish the promotora model. So
Oh,
we
yeah.
worked with women, leaders in their community, taught them how to have these conversations, because what happens with women is that we sit and we start chatting, whether it's over swig drinks or
Right.
wherever, right?
Sure.
But we have these conversations. And so we really wanted these women to know how to start these conversations with their peers. And so once we taught them that, they went in their communities and they had these conversations with women.
Mhm.
Um, and it was a peer-to-peer learning
Sure.
opportunity, which means so much more
Mhm.
than if I come in and talk to you as the quote unquote expert,
Mhm.
right? But it's your peer talking to you. But you
Mhm.
have enough skills now that you can have meaningful conversations about prevention education. And it what it created was this ripple effect that now these women had the skills, they were able to teach their peers, and then that ripple effect is happening in their homes, in their families, with their children, with their other friends. And so then we see the impact of that community leadership model happening, and the healing begins
Mhm.
too, right? It's
Mhm.
like this healing model, um, within their own culture and identity.
Mhm.
So it was really cool. There's this term that, our mentor guy who guided us through this work says in Spanish, la cultura cura, which means the culture heals.
Mhm.
And so it's using the culture to lead and heal from this awful thing as sexual violence is.
I found it fascinating just as I've been a part of different processes and different events and different conversations. One, there are different needs within different cultures. There
Absolutely.
are different expectations within different cultures. And that was something that I found so fascinating of the importance of making sure that the education was developed around the needs of the culture itself.
Hmm.
And that's very powerful, right? It's very, very powerful. The other thing that I found so fascinating is that once you begin to have these conversations, so we, it, we haven't done it for a couple of years, but we would host these community events, UCASA would, and it was kind of like a fundraising, but it was really educational
Yes.
too, right?
Hmm.
And it was we were hoping we didn't invite like the big wigs that could donate the thousands and thousands of dollars. We invited friends, right?
Hmm.
We invited the community leaders, the principals, the teachers, the PTA board, like the men and women that are
Hmm.
actively engaged in the communities, the teachers, and we did an evening where they were being educated on one the problems because Utah is ranked what are we ranked in the nation?
Seventh.
Yeah, we're ranked seventh in the nation in sexual violence
Hmm.
cases, right?
Yeah.
So seventh in the nation. So it is so prevalent here in a state that you would think culturally think that it wouldn't be. Um, but what was fascinating and honestly fun, and I mean that in not a creepy way, was in providing the environment for people to have these conversations. When you say healing, so many women reached out and said, "Hey, I was sexually assaulted. Dot dot dot. I was sexually assaulted. Dot dot dot." In being in this space helped me recognize that I'm not alone. And
Right.
there's places that I can go. There's people I can be. But it really was like a healing experience to be able to
Absolutely.
be given an environment where we actually talked about it.
Yeah, and I think that those opportunities too to have those discussions, what we see is a lot of women finally recognizing that what they experienced was a
Mhm.
form of sexual violence.
Yep.
When I think about sexual violence, I always have this way of explaining it that it's a spectrum. It could
Mhm.
be from words, it could be from touching, it could be from assault,
Mhm.
right? All the way to rape,
Mhm.
right? And anything in between. And so when we start having these opportunities of education, right? Um, something happens a lot of times to these women and men, because it happens to men too, it
Absolutely.
happens to all, right? Is that they recognize, wait, I didn't like that when that person did that to me.
Mhm.
And that was sexual assault,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so they have these moments that they finally recognize and can name it. And that hopefully leads to healing and then hopefully leads to empowerment then,
Mhm.
right?
And it leads to conversations,
Yes.
right? Instead of them muddling over it in their heads, was it or wasn't it? And this is a very personal story, but as I started getting involved, what I found out, and you know this, but I found
Mhm.
out that both of my daughters had been sexually assaulted. And I did not know because I didn't even know I should be asking these
Right.
questions, right? We think that as they go into these relationships, they're all going to be hunky dory and fine. But what our kids are finding is that, and especially with social media and the on-rise of pornography and all of these things
Mhm.
that are really determining the outlook of a relationship, right?
Absolutely.
We're putting it in their hands,
Mhm.
this new form of educating, right? What as parents is what I didn't understand is the kind of questions that I needed to be asking so that I could encourage the conversation to happen.
Yes.
And it wasn't until our very first UCASA event that that brought forth all of this information that I had no idea even existed. And it had been a year. Cody had, she had experienced a year and a half prior. Charlie had been home from her mission
Yeah.
and it had started to come up then. So it's very fascinating the things that transpire that educate us as the adult that gives
Mhm.
us permission
Yeah.
to then go and ask the right kind of question.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I mean, teenagers, they're tricky. Kids are tricky. They're not going to answer things unless they're going to only offer as much information as they feel comfortable ask
Yeah.
or answering. And a lot of time that is dependent on the type of question you ask. Is it direct enough?
Yeah.
Is it like to the point, and is the environment educated enough to be able to create the comfort level that it requires to become safe, to feel
Yeah.
safe in that environment?
Yeah. And I think I've heard your story and other stories of mothers, right? I think that fear plays a big part in why we don't ask those questions or
Yeah,
why we don't have those conversations. And I think we have to be okay with sitting in sometimes uncomfortable conversations with our kids.
exactly.
Um and really not blame ourselves
Right.
also. Like
Right.
we can only do so much to protect our kids, and I know it's hard, right? Cuz
Mhm.
I'm like I don't want anything bad to ever happen to my
Right.
son, right? To
Right.
anyone.
Right.
But we know that there's other people around that may harm, that may hurt. Um and we have to be able to sit in those uncomfy spots sometimes,
We really, really do.
and ask those
We do.
uncomfy
Well, and
questions.
I'm gonna hit this straight on too because this is a problem, and I think culturally here in the state of Utah is that we don't recognize how prevalent sexual assault
Yes,
is, and we live in this very, very ignorant land of bliss, right? And it is so prevalent every single day in our kids' lives.
absolutely. And I think that the other layer to that too is that we still don't believe women. And I think one of the biggest things that we have to recognize obviously is 1 in 3 women in Utah will experience sexual violence, and 1 in 6 men will experience sexual violence.
Right.
Um so we know it impacts all gender identity. But women are disproportionately impacted by sexual violence.
Right.
1 in 3 is just the number based on those that have reported, and we also know that this is the most underreported crime.
It's 90% of it will not be reported.
Yes,
So 1 in 3 is actually 10% of the overall statistic.
exactly.
That's crazy.
It's crazy, but yet we still, I think this session kind of gives us a glimpse of the work that UCASA does, because sometimes it's hard to understand what is the role of the coalition, what do we do? But this is a perfect example of what we do, and also the environment that we live in Utah still.
Mhm.
This session, after every session for the past 3 years, Representative Romero has proposed a bill that would not require a law enforcement agent to ask a victim of sexual assault to do a polygraph test. And one of the things that the reasons behind it are layered. It doesn't work. It's not a good investigative tool. Obviously, when a victim is in trauma, they're going to fail the
Yes,
test,
yes,
right? No
yes.
matter what,
Right.
they're going to fail the test. And so we were proposing this bill of saying, hey, we should not ask a victim, just removing ask. We do not need to ask a victim to take a polygraph bill or a test, right? And so the entire time, the question is, why? If she's not lying, then she would, right?
Mm.
And I can tell you that most victims would say, "Yes, I'll take it," because they're not lying. They're telling the
Right.
truth. But
Right.
the reality of is this is not a reliable way to find out,
Mhm.
right? An
Mhm.
investigation because
Right.
again, trauma and all of that. So the ongoing message was victims are lying.
Mm-hmm.
Victims lie. They're not telling the truth. This
Mm-hmm.
is not happening in our state.
Right.
Women are not being truthful.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea still is part and embedded in our communities and our culture,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that I think that's one of the things that we have to change is this very simple believe women. When
Mm-hmm.
they tell you something happened to them, believe them.
Mm-hmm. I love that. You're right. You're absolutely right. I want to go back over really quick the reality of sexual assault. I feel like we've hit it pretty good. But what are the statistics? Once again, I know we did 1 in 3 women in
Mhm.
Utah
Mhm.
will suffer sexual violence. 1 in 6 men. Only 1 out of 10 acts of sexual violence are reported.
Mhm.
Correct? Would you say that differently? How would you say that?
I mean, I don't know 1 out of 10, but I would say, it's probably the most underreported crime that
Okay.
exists. Mhm.
Okay, awesome. What is some other statistics? And I mean, we have women, men listening all over, right? So let's not just so focus on the Utah statistics. So what is
Yeah.
the overall national statistics
Yeah.
for sexual violence?
So the national statistics is 1 in 4 women will
Okay.
experience some form of sexual violence throughout their lifetime, and 1 in 6 men is a national. What we also see not only here in Utah but also at the national level is that kind of our high risk population of sexual violence are between the ages of like 13 to 19-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
They're at higher risk of sexual violence. And then of course we our kind of next population is our like college age students
Mm-hmm.
too. They are at higher risk of violence. We see that too. So
Interesting. What is the statistic when it comes to children?
children varies definitely, but I think the most accurate one is 1 in 6 children. So we know that that's also pretty high.
That's
Um,
very, very high.
yes.
Very,
Hmm.
very high. I mean, literally, the statistics are in my family
Yeah.
right now. They're sitting in the
And
8 of my kids.
what's interesting too to remember when it comes to sexual violence is that that we have this idea that it's the stranger in the alley
Mhm.
or, the person that's creepy down the street.
Right.
But the reality is that whether it's a child, whether it's an adult or adolescent, usually the ones that are doing the harm is somebody who has access to your kids, someone in your family, someone you know. Um, Most of the assaults is by someone you know
Right.
who's a trusted individual in your
Someone
life.
you're dating.
Exactly.
I mean, literally somebody you're dating. I find this fascinating. So mutual. I want to talk about mutual really
Yeah.
quick because I think this is an important part of this discussion. Is so mutual is a dating app
Hmm.
specifically for the LDS population, which
Yeah.
is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But what they were finding, just tell me a little bit of why they called you in, how that conversation happened, and what you've learned.
Yeah, so a lot of dating apps, including Mutual, had reached out to us because they were seeing a lot of violence happening within their dating opportunities that they were,
Mm-hmm.
the young people were having, and so they wanted to also know how their organization or their company could respond and help, and also give their staff tools on what to do and what resources would be available. So they did an incredible job of bringing us in, training their staff and then also creating little videos that really talked about what consent was, what a healthy relationship was. Because oftentimes we go to what does an unhealthy relationship look
Sure.
like?
Sure.
But what we need to kind of think about is what does a healthy relationship look like and feel like?
Right.
And so we had those opportunities to talk to them. But again, a lot of research that has been done around dating apps shows that um, the sexual assault cases where they met through a dating app, were much more violent
Hmm.
than if they had not met through a dating app.
Interesting.
Very interesting, conversation. I also, wanna share, I worked on a case where they met through a dating app, and I don't recall which dating app they met through, but, um, they met through a dating app. They talked through text messages the entire time, and then finally they decided that they would meet up. And they met up, at her apartment, and he assaulted her. And it went through the criminal justice process. He was found guilty of assault, which is a very rare situation. But he was found guilty, and the judge actually sentenced him to work with UCASA. So I got this call from his attorney And I was like, "What? Like, what? Why would UCASA want to deal with someone who had done this harm, right, or perpetrated against somebody else?" Um, and I had to kind of sit with it for a little bit, and then I thought maybe this is a good opportunity to provide education, to kind of gain knowledge on the perpetrator side of what happened,
Mhm.
what led to this behavior.
Mhm.
And so myself and a couple board members and other advocates had the opportunity to interview him
Mm.
and kind of hear what happened, what went wrong.
Mhm.
And so as he shared, and actually the survivor chose to be part of that as
Mm.
well. She didn't say anything, she just listened, but she chose that that was part of her healing journey,
Mm.
that she wanted to see that and recognize the level of accountability on his end, right?
Mhm.
Um, and he did. He took accountability for that behavior and realized what he had done was wrong.
Mhm.
He said that. Um, and as we asked those questions, one thing that kind of stood out to me was he said, if I could go back, one of the things that I would have done differently is actually spent more time with her in person.
Mm.
Because I should have listened and recognized some of those cues that she
Mhm.
was not into it, right?
Mhm.
But they had only interacted through text messages.
Right.
Um, he said if I could go back, I would take the time to get to know her more and have those conversations because I did not recognize that she was not engaged in it. And
Mm.
so um, I think that that was really helpful for me to know how to teach that too, right? How
Mhm.
to teach consent and how important it is to have those conversations ahead of time
Mhm.
before I'm meeting up with somebody, in a location that maybe is not the safest, right? But I also want to say that dating apps are not to blame, right?
Right.
It is the opportunity for us to kind of think about that what we have created in our community and the expectations is what feeds violence, right? Not not just this avenue, right? And so it could happen anywhere with any one of us,
Mhm.
whether we met through a dating app or at a restaurant, right?
Sure. Sure.
But that those conversations, again, back to the conversations, are so important in terms of prevention and response.
I love that. I remember, one particular it was a very I think it was the one at the library, and we opened it up to Q&A. The panel came up, and, we were talking about the roles and responsibilities of, yes, we have the survivors, but we also have the perpetrators.
Yes.
And, a friend of mine, and this is a very this is a sensitive subject, so, I'm not gonna obviously have any names or anything, but a friend of mine who had been a counselor at an elementary school had been a act of sexual violence, student on student,
Mhm.
in the boys' bathroom. And he had been assigned to counsel. Neither family could afford or had means to do like go get a counselor, a therapist, that sort of thing. And so the school actually provided a therapist through or a counselor through the school. And he had been working with the victim.
Mhm.
And about 2 weeks into it, what they had found is that the perpetrator also needed to be counseled and have therapy and those sort of things. And they actually asked him to be now start to work with the perpetrator. Well, he had just spent a couple weeks listening to
Mhm.
really starting to connect with this victim and really start to understand the story and the awful events that had happened. And now he was being asked. And
Mhm.
this is actually very fascinating because I would had this was he was supposed to come to the event.
Mhm.
He couldn't make it. His wife went instead. It was just fascinating because this is a little plug. This is not a problem for women.
Mhm.
This is a problem that we need everyone, men, women,
Yes.
children. Well, not probably children, but even so, if it's appropriate, teenagers, we need everyone at the table to this conversation, right?
Absolutely.
And so he sent his wife, which is fine, whatever. We were actually driving home from a soccer game together. His wife wanted to go eat. I didn't want to go. He didn't want to go. So it was funny. I was like, "Hey, you want me to take your husband home?" There, she's like, "Heck yeah, he'll just bug me." Gave this opportunity, and I was talking to him about this situation, this conversation that we had, and he just said, "Amanda, that's very fascinating. Let me tell you a story."
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how this story came up. Again, because I had put myself in the community as somebody that was a safe space
Mhm.
to have these conversations with, it's been so fascinating to me who is willing to come and talk to me
Yeah.
about it, right?
Right.
But that's a whole nother side story. So we're in the car, we're talking, and he's like, I got the victim was my client. I don't even know what you would my student that I was
Uh-huh.
working with. And he got pulled, and they asked me to now work with the perpetrator. And he said, was I was mad. I was mad at this kid. I had just spent weeks listening to what had happened, and I was mad at him, and I didn't want to work. And he was the perpetrator. He had hurt this little boy. And so he had met with him a couple times, and as he started to talk with the perpetrator, which I hate calling a child that, but it is what it is. If there's a better term to use, you can.
I mean, I always say person who caused the harm,
Okay,
you
the
know?
person that caused the harm. That's
Mhm.
actually sounds so much better, especially when talking about a child. But he started to listen, and this little boy started to open up, and he finally got to the point where he asked, "Where did you learn this behavior?
Exactly.
Why did you think that this was an okay way to treat somebody else?" And what had ended up coming out is he had been sexually assaulted since he was about 2 years old,
Mhm.
and it is all he knew. And it was in that moment, I still get chills thinking about it, that there are not always, but in this particular moment, there is absolutely a space that has to happen, that we are also providing space and treatment and love and concern for the perpetrators as well.
Absolutely.
Because and that was essentially what came out in this heated discussion in this UCASA event. Was we had, we had teachers, we had the nurse, we had and then we had our cute panel member that was trying to keep things
Mhm.
good and wholesome, and but the conversation was important, and things get heated, but ultimately what ended up coming out is we don't know
Mhm.
what we don't know.
Absolutely. And I think it's layered, right?
Yes.
That when someone does harm, it is layered. I've had the opportunity to work in prison systems with women and men.
Yeah.
And as I heard the stories of women who were incarcerated, there was not one story that did not have a connection with domestic violence or sexual violence.
Hmm.
They had experienced it at some point.
Hmm.
Um, I recall sitting in a group of with 10 women who were incarcerated for life. They were lifers.
Wow.
And, she told me her story, and she said, for many of us, one day it was either me or him.
Mm.
It was years of abuse.
Hmm.
And finally, I could not take it anymore.
Right.
And it was either my life or his.
Hmm.
And that's what brought me here.
Right.
Um, and
Mm.
then I recall this young girl with this tattoo across her chest that said, "Who can I turn to?"
Mm.
with the question mark.
Interesting.
And I thought, what has happened in this 20-something-year-old girl's life where she feels that she can't turn to no one
Mhm.
because she felt so alone?
Mhm.
And she was so great at teaching about prevention. She was one of our educators in that program, who had experienced violence as well, sexual violence throughout her whole childhood. And so, all of this to say, you can be multiple things at once. You can
Mhm.
be a victim, and you
Mhm.
can also be someone who has done harm,
Mhm.
and that you still are deserving of healing,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And that's really hard and difficult to sit with and try to understand. But what we ask is that we recognize that person who's in front of us and meet them where they're at. And
Mhm.
it could be that they are victims and perpetrators at the
Mhm.
same time.
Mhm.
And the same in the men's prison.
Sure.
When we had these conversations with these groups and these men, hardcore criminals, right? A life of crime. And they would look at me and say, "Well, I didn't know that what I did to my wife was wrong because I grew up seeing my father do that to my mother."
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't until someone sat down with me and taught me this. And unfortunately, at that point, it was too late because
Mhm.
they were already incarcerated,
Sure.
right? That I learned that that behavior was wrong.
Mm.
Um, which again, a lot of the rape crisis centers or this work started from substance abuse clinics as well.
Mhm.
That led to substance abuse, that led to a life of crime,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
This violence,
Right.
it's a circle,
Mhm.
right? And so until someone takes the time to say, "Hey, how can I help you? What can I do? What happened to you?"
Mhm.
Right? Um, is where we hopefully start breaking those cycles of violence.
Mm. I love it. I love it. I hate it. I love it. It's all just one of those crazy.
Layered.
Yeah, it's so layered.
Yes.
So layered. Um, so what April is Sexual Awareness Month.
Yes.
Um, and this month is really about education and prevention, right? So what are some goals of awareness of this awareness month nationally? Like what's the point?
Yeah. So, Sexual Assault Awareness Month is in April, and so it is again an opportunity to really engage with your community. We have 13 rape crisis centers in the state of Utah, but across the country there are coalitions like ours. Each state also has rape crisis centers
Mhm.
that provide training, education. So we encourage you wherever you are to connect with your local center. Find out who they are, find out what they do, get involved, volunteer. But
Something real quick that I want to
yeah,
bring up. Those that are listening, this is not a victim problem, which I feel like what I've learned, not always, but most of the time, those that are involved are because they have at one point been a victim,
yeah.
right? And I think that's sad. And I feel like that also is lonely. Like I only care because I have to care because I'm a victim. And but what we got to remember is all of these violences, whether it's rape, whether it's sexual assault, whether it's substance abuse, all the things
Mhm.
affect all of us.
Absolutely.
We are, it's my favorite quote of all time in sports. You are only as strong as your weakest link. And if one out of six boys, men, and one out of four nationally women are going to be sexually assaulted in their life, which means 25% of women are going to be sexually assaulted within
Mhm.
their lifetime. And what is that? One out of six is 15 ish.
Mhm.
Um, we have a major problem on our hands. So it can't just be that have suffered as a victim stepping up and being involved in this process.
Absolutely. We gotta challenge those social norms
Hmm.
that teach us that this behavior is okay, or that teach us that we shouldn't say, "Hey, that's not appropriate,"
Right.
you know,
Right.
or that says she's to blame because she was wearing something short,
Hmm.
or that person is to blame because they got drunk. What did they expect, right?
Hmm.
We should not ever fear someone literally harming us physically because we wore something revealing,
Right.
or that we went out to a party.
Right.
And that should never be okay. And so I think that that's the biggest part around Sexual Assault Awareness Month, is recognizing that we all play a part in ending violence, that it doesn't just that it means that we are all called to do this work
Hmm.
in order to prevent it, in order to respond to it. And prevention, again, is so important. Sometimes we think we can't do something about it, but we can. We
Hmm.
can be a listening ear. We can interrupt violence if we see it. We can say, hey, that's not okay behavior. And if we don't feel safe enough to do it when we see it, getting help.
Hmm.
Find somebody to who can help, who can do it, right? It's all of those ways that we can intervene. It's creating community. It's so that folks can feel heard, valued, and respected. We can do that in many different ways in our community, whether it's in it getting involved in sports, whether it's getting involved in a community garden, whatever
Hmm.
that is. When we build community, we create love and support for one another,
Hmm. And trust.
and trust.
Right? Because we got to
Exactly.
be trusted. People have got to be able to trust us when they're going to be the most vulnerable or when we're going to talk about these super vulnerable conversations. We
Absolutely.
have to have trust within ourselves.
Yeah. And if we do that, then what happens is that folks feel safe to talk to us.
Hmm.
And if we can be that safety for that person, then we can link them to resources. We
Hmm.
can link them to support, and that healing can start. And I do want to say that I keep coming back to this idea of the ripple effect.
Hmm.
If we can heal somebody, if we can help heal that that survivor, then hopefully it will impact the way that they mother, the way that they parent, the way that they teach their children,
Hmm.
and how their children will teach their children, right? And
Absolutely.
that empowerment model
Right.
is real. And
Right.
it is. I know that it works. I
Hmm.
know because I see it even in my own little 4-year-old,
Hmm.
right? That he does feel empowered. And that's because I often give them those opportunities to feel and be empowered as who he is, right? And so that's way. But April, we do that. One of the things that we do here in Utah, and across the world actually is Denim Day.
Mhm.
And it's a way for people to have fun, right? Because it's not always scary to talk about this, but it's a way to engage, have fun, and show up to send a message for victims of sexual assault. And it has a story to it, and a reason why we wear denim on Denim Day. But in Italy, this case started in Italy. A teenager who was taking driver's ed courses, and her instructor raped her. So she reported this. It went to court. He was found guilty, and he challenged this guilty verdict all the way to the Italian Supreme Court. So when it went to the Italian Supreme Court, he was actually found not guilty. And the reason the judge gave for that reversal was because her jeans were too tight, insinuating that in order for her to have removed her jeans, she must have helped. St- this idea that then this teenager was consenting to having sexual relationships with her instructor, which off, at the very base level, you should not be having any type of sexual relationships with underage kids, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Yes.
but this idea that what she was wearing, right, had a part in the sexual assault. Again, blaming the victim.
Sure.
And so the Italian parliament women were really upset and said, no, this is not okay. And so they decided to wear jeans in solidarity for this victim and to show support to all victims of sexual assault. And so this kind of was brought in to the United States, and it's kind of gained traction across the world. So we wear jeans on that day with a purpose to raise awareness, a purpose to send a message to victims that we believe them, that it doesn't matter what you were wearing. Sexual assault is never okay, and what I wear is not an invitation, right?
I love it.
And so we have this event. We're actually doing this a week early because we don't want to conflict with all of the Denim Day events that are happening across the state of Utah. In Salt Lake, UCASA is going to be hosting this. And we can give you all the details if you're in the area for you to come in and support us. And the other cool thing that we do during April is recognizing the incredible leaders in our state. And we do what we call SAM Awards, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month acronym, for leaders across the state. They are nominated, and we get a committee together, and we get to honor the incredible work of businesses, advocates, community leaders, government partners, and recognize them for the work that they're doing to end violence and also respond to violence. And so Hafti has been a recipient of that in the past. But again, there are across the country so many events happening in April to raise awareness. And our very first kickoff event is Start by Believing.
Mm.
And so many times people ask me, what can I do? And it's as simple as that. You start by believing. You say, I believe you. I'm here. How can I help you?
Mhm.
To everybody who comes forward.
I love it. I love it. Are you going up to state capitol again on that date, or are you doing something different?
We're doing something different today. We're going to have it at public,
Oh, okay.
and it will have food
Okay.
there as well. And we're doing our awards.
Oh, they're at that.
Uh-huh. So Denim Day across the country is April 29th.
Okay, I thought it was the 29th. Is it the same day every year?
It's always the it's the Wednesday. I think it's the 3rd or 4th Wednesday of the month.
Oh, okay.
4th
Fourth
Wednesday?
Wednesday
Uh-huh.
of the month in
Yes,
April.
of April. Mhm.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, for more, we'll definitely get more information. Another amazing thing to do is to look up the rape crisis centers in your community as well. There's always needs there too.
Absolutely.
Volunteering needs, monetary needs. So look up the rape crisis centers in your area, and you may also follow UCASA.
Yes.
Again, I want to reiterate the importance of understanding this is not a Utah-based coalition. It is nationwide. And so everybody has a UCASA,
Yes, in
right?
their state. Mhm.
Yeah, in their state. So get involved there as well. Go follow their social media. Start to learn, because there is a ton of educating that they do just in their social media, giving you really great um, pr- tips about
Absolutely.
different aspects of sexual assault, how to support survivors, how to get involved. and to do those sort of things. So that would be something that I would say just right off the cuff. Go follow social media, UCASA if you're in Utah. Go find your state coalition, and then also go check out your rape crisis centers and see how you can get involved there. Even again, if you're following their social media, a lot of the rape crisis centers across the nation have a great social media presence
Absolutely.
and are doing a really, really good job at just the basic educational aspects of preventing sexual violence.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, what's one word that describes your mission right now?
Wow, I think right now, at this very moment, what I keep coming to is healing. It's just not only healing yourself, helping heal others, but healing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What's one piece of advice for parents raising daughters and sons today?
Wow, that's rough because I do think that every parent knows their child the best, and what their needs are. But I shared this post. I can't remember what the exact wording, but it said, "Teach your girls to be strong, powerful women, and teach your boys to be kind, respectful men."
Oh, I love that.
Hmm.
I love that. One thing every community could do better to protect people.
I you know I think it's really being a safe place for people. I think it comes back to love and loving your neighbor,
Hmm.
loving your coworker, and making sure that you're creating an environment where they feel safe, seen, and valued.
Hmm.
And when we have that view and this feeling of, I think that we will hopefully not want to harm them, um, and prevent violence from happening, and creating a space that if something did happen, that we will always be a listening ear for that person. And we may not have all the answers. And that's one thing that I often say. You may not have all the answers,
Right.
but there's resources that you can reach out to, get some help, get some support, um, and just be a listening ear. Believe them.
Hmm. And going back to the very initial story that you started off with about this little 4 year old and the fact that this little 4 year old trusted her mom and that relationship was there enough to instantly go tell her
Absolutely.
mom something was off. That is really kind of our goal, not with every person we meet, right?
Hmm.
But that we have those relationships with people that they know that they can come to us and trust us
Absolutely.
with things of this nature.
And, one thing that I didn't share in the beginning of that story was that the person who had done that to, this little 4-year-old was grandpa.
Mm.
And and it's so hard to think that grandpa could do that to
Right.
that, right? But I do want that's why I keep coming back to this idea that we have to teach about boundaries
Right.
and remind even our littles, right? That it's okay to say no.
Right.
It's okay to tell mom when you or dad or whoever that trusted adult is, that something bad happened to you. And I'm not going to be mad.
Hmm.
I'm going to help you.
Yeah. It's amazing. What's one thing that gives you hope for the future?
I think that seeing the littles really look at ways that they can engage in anti-prevention behavior already,
Hmm.
right? Or saying, "Hey, that's not okay. You shouldn't do that." Is one way that gives me hope. But also seeing young people, honestly, I think that's one of my favorite parts about this work. I've shared this often with one of my coworkers is that I get to see people like Charlie or Aaliyah or Abby that are young people engaged in this work. Cody, right?
Hmm.
Really showing up and taking a stance and saying, I'm not okay with this. I'm going to do something about it. My job is to help support the future generation and also step aside,
Hmm.
because they do incredible stuff.
Hmm.
And I don't know everything, right? But I may say, "Hey, look, I'm thinking about this," and then Charlie would come back and say, "Oh, and I've now built this because of those conversations you and I have had, which I didn't even think about it, but that impacted so many, right?
Hmm.
And moved people
Right.
to take action."
Hmm.
That's what gives me hope that I think that the future generations are going to end violence. And I do believe that. I do believe that our young people are going to end this.
I love it. I hope they do. I really
Yes.
do. I hope they do. Lily, thank you. Thank you
Thank
for the
you.
work that you're doing and helping educate us everywhere, right? Everywhere. Conversations like this matter because awareness leads to prevention, education leads to prevention, and prevention protects lives. If you'd like to learn more about UCASA, find resources, or support the mission, we'll include links down below in the show notes. And if this episode taught you something, or if you opened your eyes to something new, we encourage you to share the conversation. Get involved in the conversation. You do not have to be an expert to be an advocate in this work. Education is one of the most powerful tools, and we can help you find it so that you can too also, become a part of this work. When women support women, each other in their intentions, we rise together. If today's conversation moved you or taught you something new, we invite you to share this with your friends because awareness is where prevention begins. Sexual violence thrives in silence, but education, community, and courage have the power to change that. Every one of us has a role to play in creating safer homes, schools, churches, and communities. By listening, by believing survivors, by having honest conversations, and by teaching the next generation about respect, dignity, and accountability. Organizations like UCASA are doing the hard work every day to support survivors and prevent violence before it begins. And the more we understand, the more we can stand to get together and protect the people that we love. Because when communities choose awareness, compassion, and action, we move closer to a world where every person can live with safety, dignity, and trust. And that kind of change begins with conversations just like this one. If you or someone you know has been affected by sexual violence, just know there will be links down below with resources that will help you navigate those situations and those conversations. Thanks so much for being here today, Lily, and thanks for joining us this week. Mwah. Love you guys.